Good evening. The U.S. House of Representatives has just a few hours ago passed a budget bill. This bill is very much in keeping with the 2025 blueprint plan that Donald Trump has never heard of, does not know anything about, or endorse. Trump has hailed this bill. He would like to see a unification between this one and the Senate version. We're going to talk about the differences. We're going to talk about what's in these bills. I will say that on initial examination, they are catastrophic. Having said that, this is going to be one of those situations where it's bad news, bad news, bad news, bad news, bad news, bad news, and then a caveat or two, a significant one to all of it. So I would like everyone to recognize that this is slightly complicated. It's not that bad, and it sounds absolutely terrible. It is, but some significant caveats going forward. So let's talk about what just happened. A number of even conservatives did not want to pass the bill. The goal of this bill has been in large part to fulfill Trump's promise of reducing the deficit. The deficit is $1.6 trillion a year, $1.6 trillion. There's a very serious problem in this country, which we have not taken seriously for a very long time. One of the things I like about 𝐒𝐨𝐿 is that he and I disagree quite strongly on a number of political issues. He is very much correct that we can't continue this way. We will end up with a sovereign debt crisis and the United States will collapse. It very nearly happened in 2007, 2008. It can and eventually will happen if we don't solve this deficit. There's a theory called modern monetary policies that says it's not going to happen because we can print our way out of it, just print money and buy off all the debt. The reason that doesn't work is because if you print the money, you devalue all the current existing money. This causes inflation to skyrocket. No one will ever buy your debt again because you've paid for it with money you've printed, making all of the money, including the money you paid for it with, worth a heck of a lot less. So it's a serious problem, and it needs to be dealt with seriously. So I am for fiscal responsibility. I am for it more than many liberals. I think liberals are absolutely, of course, for it, but we have a tendency to see the programs we want and forget that they haven't been paid for yet. $1.6 trillion deficit. Trump has said that he is going to wipe out the deficit. How is he going to wipe out the deficit? Well, this bill, based on, again, the 2025 plan, seeks to cut roughly $2.2 trillion in overall spending from the federal budget. I believe, I want to say the budget is currently at $7 trillion, somewhere in there. So that's a pretty significant cut. And since our deficit is about 1.7 trillion, that would eliminate the deficit, presumably. Going to be some questions about the details. $2 trillion in overall spending cuts over the next decade, to help pay for the $4.5 trillion in tax cuts that this package also includes. Let me say again, this package includes $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. Now that is $4.5 trillion in revenue that will not be coming in. That is a part of this deal to help eliminate the deficit. For those of you who can add, this will increase the deficit by about $2.3 to $2.5 trillion. The way this is presumably made up for is by economic growth. If the economy grows enough, that makes up for this. Republican, I've forgotten Massey's first name, but Massey pointed out that you would need to add 2.5 points to the current best projected models for growth in order to even come close to making that up. And the problem is, as a result of tariffs, as a result of uncertainty in the markets, as a result of what is purportedly going to be firing 80% of a 2 million federal workforce, we're going to go into a recession. We are not going to see positive growth. We're going to see negative growth. This budget is fantasy land. Where do the cuts come from? $880 billion in cuts are targeted at the Energy and Commerce Committee. Why is that important? That's important because, and Nancy Pelosi once said this, and she got some shit for it, probably deserves it, but it is a real explanation for how screwed up this system is. She said, well, we won't know what's in the bill until we pass it. What both sides have a tendency to do is to take unpopular things that are going to get cut, popular things that are going to get cut, and not cut them, but instead make the cuts to the committee that controls them, and then tell that committee, you have to cut X, Y, and Z from your budget, and you need to figure out a way to do it. And usually the only way to do it is to cut the popular programs. But that way the committee takes the heat and not the person signing the budget or the congressman who signed along. So what is the biggest item that the Energy and Commerce Committee oversees in terms, well, it's not their biggest item, excuse me, but what is one of the bigger items that they handle? Medicaid. While nobody has said it, well, a number of Republicans have said it. There was 4 Republican holdouts that said that they would not vote for this bill because of the cuts in Medicaid. There are no cuts in Medicaid in the bill. There's cuts to the Energy and Commerce Committee, which controls Medicaid. And the cuts are sufficient enough that there appears to be absolutely no way to come even close to that $880 billion number without cutting Medicaid significantly, which appears to be and it's Republicans who are saying that, and they're right. Now, because their majority is small enough, they actually could only lose 1 vote, which they did. They lost Massey. Let's see. So again, what they're basically doing is they're targeting the committees responsible for Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, various other things, and saying you have to cut X, Y, and Z from your budget. Those committees could do it any way they want to, but ostensibly the way these cuts have been done, they're going to cut Medicaid. They're going to have to cut something. So Johnson acknowledged the precarity of unifying Republicans to pass the bill. So earlier at about 10 a.m., they were having difficulties passing it. There were Republicans that were saying that the cuts were actually way too high. This is Republicans saying that the cuts were way too high. Republicans who were also saying that the cuts to Medicaid were unacceptable. I don't know. Trump apparently made a number of phone calls and managed to sway them. I have no doubt. Let's see, it was Massey, Victoria Spartz from Indiana, and Tim Burchett from Tennessee opposed the resolution, and a number of moderates said that plan cuts are too high, especially weary of Medicaid cuts. So, long story short, it seems that there's going to be some significant cuts in these programs. The bill does the exact opposite of what it does. It creates much more tax cuts, thus thereby cutting revenue, than it does spending cuts. So the spending cuts are to pay for tax cuts, probably going to the upper 1%, meaning that they're going to cut social programs to increase money to the people who already have money, and do so by adding another $2 trillion a year to the deficit. That is fucking staggering. Let's see. The resolution does not specify where the spending will be cut. Yeah, I already covered that. Instead, establishes top-line numbers House committees would be required to adhere to in writing legislation to lay the spending framework for Trump's agenda, which appears to be nothing but tax cuts for the wealthy at all costs. All right. One other thing, there is one area that saw a significant increase. That's the military budget. Military spending has gone up. Now, military spending has been a difficult topic for me for a while. Let me explain why. The numbers have changed only slightly, but we're going to show you this right here. This is the world military spending in 2022. You can see that the U.S. spent more than its top 10 competitors combined. Now, China and Russia are not allies, but everybody else on that list is. So if we get attacked, Japan, South Korea, France, Germany, UK, these are people that, we can count on coming to help us. So you can kind of tack them onto the list on the left there if you want to. And the rest of the world, 5.14 billion. The U.S. is now increasing, again, as a means of presumably curbing our deficit. The U.S. is increasing the military budget. Another interesting thing about the military budget is that we own over 90% of the world's foreign bases. Any base that does not belong to the country where it resides, most of them are owned by us. The U.S. owns 750 bases across the world in countries that are not ours. 750. All of the other countries of the world combined have 40. 40. I agree that the U.S. needs to be able to project power, and by the way, soft power can be equally important, if not more important, than hard power, and the reality is soft power costs a lot less. Cutting U.S. aid, I will tell you this, it will do more for the budget. It would help the budget more to cut military spending and increase programs like U.S. aid, and would be better liked, meaning, guess what? People are less likely to attack us. France is already talking about moving their support from the missile shield, from supporting a missile shield for the U.S. to supporting one for the EU. Why would the EU need one? Well, I suppose Russia might attack it, but if the U.S. has a missile shield, unless they're thinking the U.S. isn't going to be their ally at some point in the near future. Not hard to imagine, considering the U.S. voted with Russia against condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Good to see you, 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐿. Hold 1 second. So, actually, no, I think we got that. So, 𝐒𝐨𝐻𝐿, I don't know where. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I think I have covered just about everything. We are looking at what appears to be an additional 2 to 2.5 trillion added to the deficit instead of removed. Any thoughts?
Oh, so many thoughts. Oh, how incompetent can you be about this? Why, oh why? I mean, the point is we're spending too much money, we're increasing the deficit by too much, and this is unsustainable. We need to lower the deficit. If you're going to make cuts and then remove taxes on top of that, so that all of your cutting that is hurting real people in the real world who depend upon these programs that are being cut, then you're just causing a hell of a lot of chaos and problems and hurting people for no benefit.
Well, unless you're one of the people in the tax bracket getting cut, but my suspicion is that's not the bracket that's on Medicare or Medicaid.
Yeah, probably not. I'm not a fan of taxes. I'm fairly libertarian. This is a nightmare. You're not going to gain anything from this. I mean, except cause a whole hell of a lot of people a whole hell of a lot of problems and pain and suffering and misery. And you're not going to get any closer to the actual goal of reducing the deficit or the debt that the United States is in. The only reason, aside from maybe some philosophical reasons, to reduce spending this much is to, stop the growth of our debt. You're not accomplishing it when you also grant all of these tax cuts. And of course, you can only cut taxes to people who are actually paying taxes. So, and usually a lot more taxes. Yeah. So it's like the upper 50% of people are the only ones that are going to benefit. The lower 50% of Americans aren't going to get any benefit from any kind of tax cut. So you're cutting the services that the lower 50% of the population have come to rely on because you've made them available. And why would you not take advantage of programs that can really help you? Only now you've come to expect. I hate to say expect. This sounds callous, but you've come to rely. People have come to rely on these programs for some genuine help that they need, and now we're just gonna, we're gonna cut all of this stuff out of here, and so the bottom half of Americans are going to suffer even more because the programs that they rely on, in some cases for their very lives, are going to get whittled away in the name of some sort of government efficiency, or saving the financial of the U.S. government. And yet we're going to go ahead and offset all of those cutting in government spending with even more cuts in tax revenues. Unfortunately, even though I don't want more and more taxes, I think that we're taxed quite a lot. You can't solve the deficit problem and the debt problem by cutting more and more taxes. It's like the government needs more revenue and it needs to spend less. It needs to do both of those things. And when you're just cutting everything and causing a lot of problems for real world Americans without getting the benefit of reducing the debt or the deficit, this is just, it's infuriating. It's like I looked briefly at this and I'm like, I can't believe they're doing this. This is stupid. And on top of that, if many of the economists are right, and this drives us into a recession, well, it's going to get even doubly worse. Well, it's already doubly worse. It's going to get triply worse, if that's even a word, because they're going, the government is then going to start cutting interest rates. They're going to start monetizing the debt again. They're going to invest in quantitative easing again to try and stimulate the government, because recession hurts everyone. So, you're going to pile on even more debt and deficit because you've cut all of these programs, and now you're going to try and give out a whole bunch of money. We're already kind of hovering on the edge of that inflation monster. Thankfully, it hasn't gotten super bad, but we've seen what it can do, and historically, it can be very frightening what inflation can do. So, yes, let's greatly expand the monetary supply. It's like I'm flustered. This is dumb.
Yeah, it's dumb. And Titan said something that I think is interesting, and I'd like to talk about it. And Sweet has a question, which I think we're going to address. So Titan said that this is actually just a deliberate targeting of people who were for the civil rights and people who it's a deliberate targeting of everybody in the economic lower class in order, in essence, to wipe them out. Now, I have a hard time going and taking my head there, but it's getting harder to think that isn't a part of the agenda, and here's why. First of all, our newly minted, just insane RFK, he's the head of Health and Human Services, has suggested taking the mentally ill and putting them in health farms, which is a truly terrifying way to refer to it. The U.S., here's the problem. I understand. I really do understand for heroes, the need for heroes that, Ulysses, General Lee was, fighting for a cause he believed in and all this other stuff. I get that. I really do. I have empathy for that position. The problem is you have to realize that there are consequences, and when you ignore these consequences, then, history may not repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. The U.S. has had its own flirtation with eugenics, especially forced sterilization. I think it was called the Mississippi appendectomy, where what they would do is they would take black people who were coming in for either other surgeries or whatever and say, oh, you need your appendix done, and then they would force sterilize them without their knowledge. We've been forced sterilizing people detained by immigrants. ICE has even done forced sterilizations. It has been reduced significantly since, I believe it was 1974, when California banned the practice, but it still exists in at least a few pockets in the United States. According to The Guardian, which there is I don't know if there's a link to this in the Discord, I'll put it in. The Guardian says that Adolf Hitler himself actually observed some of the forced sterilization techniques used in the United States. Quote, yet German readers still closely followed American eugenic accomplishments as the model. Biological courts, forced sterilization, detention of the socially inadequate, debate on euthanasia, as America's elite were describing the socially worthless and ancestrally unfit as, quote, bacteria, vermin, mongrels, and subhuman, a superior race of Nordics was increasingly seen as the answer to the globe's eugenics problem. U.S. laws, eugenic investigation, and ideology became a blueprint for Germany's rising tide of race biologists and race-based hate mongers. That is from The Guardian. It's linked there from an article discussing some of this that is in our Discord. I think it's in the breaking section on basically, first of all, how we have dealt with the mentally ill in the past, especially in the 1970s, including but not limited to forced sterilization, forced abortions, and what was this? And forced sterilization of Native American women and some men in the 1970s. So if you disenfranchise the group of people that you want to get rid of, it becomes a lot harder for them to get a lawyer. It becomes a lot harder and this article talks about especially with immigrants, some of the problems that were happening there was a language barrier, so they didn't realize what they were signing up for. If we didn't have a president that catered to neo-Nazis, Elon Musk rehiring that kid who said, you know, I'm for eugenics, why hasn't it started yet? Yeah, it's looking like a program to disenfranchise as many of the, quotes, undesirable people as possible and make them easier to target with things like this. What comes next, I don't know. I'm trying to see if there are ways to stop it before we get there. So that's right. Alan Turing was chemically castrated because he was gay, which was seen as a mental disease at the time. Welcome, Mark Reed. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for that comment. Any thoughts on that before I go to the only piece of good news in all of this?
I have not done nearly enough research on the history of attempted eugenics in the United States to have an informed opinion.
I've only just started getting into it. I'm disappointed that I was not more educated in it. And that was, I think, what I was talking about, the sort of whitewashing of history. You know, I always, every time I learn more and more about something that the U.S. did, it's like I was probably maybe 14 when I first learned about, not first learned, but really learned about the Japanese concentration camps in the U.S. And it's just something we don't talk about, and I understand why. Germany, to the best of my understanding and recollection, Germany does actually really teach their people about how Hitler came to power in the hopes of avoiding it from ever happening again. My suspicion is they're looking at the U.S. and they've seen, a lot of people have seen stuff like this before. So where is the good news in all of this? The only good news that makes this not catastrophic, and let's actually, so the process is not yet complete. The Senate has already passed its version of the bill. The Senate version is basically identical, but does not have the tax cuts. Meaning the Senate version actually does what it purports to do, whether you approve of the cutting the spending, at least it actually would have a balanced budget. Because they're not adding any tax cuts. My suspicion is a number of the tax cuts are going to get through, probably at least half, if not all of them. They're going through a process now called reconciliation, where both bills are compared, and they try to see what they can pass with their various constituents. Trump has, quote, truth. I'm still going to say tweeted. If I say tweeted, just assume it's truth when it's Wow, I can't believe I just said assume it's truth when it comes to Trump. assume he's using his platform, but he said that he wanted for the unified bill, the whole package. It's a beautiful bill. It's a big bill, and wants the tax cuts for himself and Musk and everyone else. The good news is that all of these numbers are over a 10-year period. And the reality is, while I can't think of a time that I've seen a spending bill this insane, or a budget this insane. I mean, it does nothing it purports to do. It slashes the federal government while slashing revenue as well. It's over a 10-year period, and we've seen bills that do some pretty catastrophic things over a 10-year period, and then 2 years later, a new Congress is sworn in, and they change the agenda. 10 years is a long time. 2 years, not so long, and it ain't 2 years anymore. It's a little less than 2 years, but this is the time to begin. And I'm gonna say, I saw a John Oliver. It's called it Trump 2.0 from a week ago. It's like a week ago. And I'm like, the amount that has passed between when he gave that show and now, it's an excellent show. And one of the things that he said, look, the way this is going to get fixed is we primary any Democrat who does not oppose all of this. Too many Democrats have not been speaking up and have just sort of been sitting there as all of this. But we either start now or give up. Those are the two options. My vote, start now. And we've talked before, get in touch with your congressman, so on and so forth. We are, from what I can tell, mostly past that. It doesn't hurt, but from now on, when you call them, say, I'm going to support anybody who primaries you, who makes stopping this their number one agenda item, who makes, impeaching Trump their number one agenda item. And that is, by the way, one of the ones that I've noticed has worked well when you call congressmen is not to say I'm going to withdraw my funding for you, because that's a negative action. I'm going to stop doing something. They don't hear that as well. Tell them what you're going to do. Tell them what your positive action is. I will support your opponent. I will support. I've got a check, $100. I'm going to send one of these every single month. Whether it goes to you or the guy who primaries you depends on what how you decide you're going to vote going forward. They hear those. That gets through much better. And one person isn't going to cut it. But if everybody starts doing that and saying, yeah, I'm going to send money to you or your opponent, pick. That's what has to happen, I think, going forward. So these numbers are terrifying. It looks like, again, we're looking at about $880 billion in cuts from Medicare. And again, it doesn't say that, but all the Dems have said that's exactly what it means, and a number of the Republicans have said that's exactly what it means. So when do you get that? When do you get the Republicans to say, yeah, that's what it means? It's the only way to do it. I can read. So I don't know. I think that just about covers it. We are going to be covering this when the bill passes, assuming it passes in roughly its current form. We are not going to go to breaking with it. We have decided we're going to go to breaking now before the bill has, before a joint bill has been sent to Trump, who will almost certainly sign it. That will show up on our Discord. Someone else will drop it so that you'll know. But if it's just this, we're not going to repeat the show for it. We will probably discuss it along with a number of other things on downtime. Any final thoughts, Zandri?
We have had decades, and in some cases over a century now, of building up the federal government. We've offered lots of programs to people who are in need. The government has a bit of a problem with efficiency just based off of its design. And there has been quite a lot of inefficient uses of taxpayer money. But to just wholesale go in and decide, hey, we're just going to start cutting all of this stuff after decades of buildup, decades of incentive structures, decades of programs that people rely on. To cut all of that away in 4 years would be catastrophic. let alone in just a few months. The way that they're going about this threatens a collapse, not only of the government, but of possible economic collapse, causing real damage to real people and the people who are least able to weather any kinds of economic turbulence. I have long said that the government shouldn't be spending this much money doing this many things, and want to see the scope of, and power of the federal government clawed back and once again constrained by the Constitution. This is not the way you do it. You're just going to hurt that many people. You cannot do it this fast. You can't unwind something that you've spent decades to up to a century doing and just undo it that fast and expect that there aren't going to be some pretty catastrophic consequences for it. Even in the trying to reduce the size and scope of our federal government, you cannot do it that fast. All right, well, let me rephrase. You can. However, you run a high risk of just simply collapsing the government entirely and making it completely inefficient or ineffective at doing anything at all. You can cause catastrophic damage to the country itself. So you could do it that fast, but those are going to be the consequences.
Yeah.
I care too much about people to ever think that that would be a good idea. Good idea, reduce the budget, balance the budget, maybe stop going so much into debt. Yeah, maybe get the American people to actually pay in taxes for everything the government does to find out if they actually support all of the things that the government does. And if they really want the government to keep doing certain things, pass a constitutional amendment granting the federal government the authority to do all of this stuff. I mean, we have processes for this, but you don't gut the entire thing, the entire machine. You don't rip out everything in the middle of it all at once, because it's just going to collapse. And I don't think anybody in the country benefits, or at least maybe a few elite, very wealthy individuals who can just jet set off to wherever the heck they want to and not really worry about it. But for the average Americans, the vast majority of Americans, this isn't going to be fun. This isn't going to be helpful. It's like you could absolutely devastate the economic engine of the United States, the entire foundation of the United States. And I think that that would be a very bad thing.
I will actually make one quick follow-up, because Mark Reed said, I have a feeling that Dogecoin will be worth a lot more if that happens. I suspect that is Musk's, part of Musk's thinking is he's an accelerationist. If he can get the U.S. off, the world off the dollar as the world reserve currency, or even collapse the U.S. economy, Dogecoin all of a sudden has value. It doesn't work that way, and I concur very much with Titan's assessment, which his Dogecoin will be meaningless, because if the dollar really does collapse, so will the rest of the global economy. At that point, water, a few other things are going to have value. It's not going to be any fiat currency or cryptocurrency. Anyways, as I said, it sounds depressing. It is depressing. So if you are not depressed, you were not listening. Having said that, if you don't feel like there is something you can do and that you should be doing it, you also have not been listening. I used to volunteer on campaigns, and I was just a door knocker at first. I think the first one, John Kerry was the first one I started on. But I worked my way up to district coordinator for the 2nd Congressional District in Connecticut for the Obama campaign, which was a great privilege. Got to be in the room with him several times. Got a nice wave from him. That's it. Never actually got to talk to him. But my district was projected to go to Hillary Clinton. This was the primaries, and we won by 2 points, an estimated 4 points. Came specifically from the work that was coming out of the headquarters for the 2nd Congressional District. So I got a call from one of the higher ups who said, "You realize you got us Connecticut because they got Groton, and from Groton they got everything else." That's not why Obama won. He would have won anyway. He was going to beat Hillary. We made it closer, and I personally made a difference. And if I hadn't shown up, he probably still would have won. But if the next guy hadn't shown up, and the next guy hadn't shown up, and the influence I did wield took a lot of time and effort, I got there. Well, who knows? Maybe I'll go back too, because as much as I love doing the show, but right now this is how I feel I can talk to the most number of people. Tell you guys, go out there. If I can do it, you can do it. Anyways, this isn't a sad, somber occasion. We can be sad, but more than anything, this is a call to get off your ass and do something about it, because what we're seeing here for a budget is utterly insane. And we've seen insane things for the last nearly 2 months. If it continues, there isn't going to be much of a country left, and I kind of think that the people doing this aren't so stupid as to not realize that. So we need to start getting on our elected officials. All right, I would like to thank our mods, thank everybody who helped out. Come join us on the Discord and keep up with this kind of stuff. There's a few other things, but I think I'll hold off on that till we do a regular show. And as always, we'll be watching if there's something else that needs your attention. Like I said, we won't go to breaking when this passes, assuming it passes in roughly the form it's in now. We'd just be repeating ourselves. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you for joining us. And we will see you at the latest Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern for downtime. Have a good night, all.